I'm just on a 20 by 20. You can use acrylic paper, you can use stretch canvas, anything you like. And we are painting our enchanted woodlands, enchanted forest, fairy forest, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just going to chat you through it in the way that I would in one of my online lessons for the membership. If you have painted before or you've painted for a long time, just take what I'm doing and make it your own. Put your own spin on it and do it in your style if you want. And if you're a complete beginner, then just follow along step by step. I am going to go in with some lemon yellow to start, just because it's got that really bright sharpness to it. Sometimes I even start with a bit of fluorescent yellow when I do these kind of glowing forest centers, because the fluorescent yellow really does lift it. So I've got some lemon yellow that I'm going for. Any light pale yellow, a slightly limey greeny yellow is better than a warm like cadmium yellow. But again, whatever you've got, we're going to add some white to it anyway, so just some titanium white. So that is going to be our first bit, and we're going to concentrate on the middle of the canvas. And yep, we are using our good old mop brush. Because I am working on such a small canvas, I have a little mini mop brush with me today, just so that maybe I can show you a couple of things easier than they're maybe not going to show up as well with the big mop brush. But I'm going to start with my big mop brush just so that we can cover loads and loads of the canvas. So when I'm using a mop brush, I like to sort of push in to the edge of the paint. So I'm not like dabbing on top of the paint. I'm taking the brush and I'm pushing in to the side. I'm just going to push into both colours at once because I want a little bit of both colours in there. And then that kind of loads just a bit of my brush without kind of getting over the whole thing. And then what we're going to do is what I like to call smooshing or tapping, but it is smooshing. It's like smooshing in, and then just picking up a little bit more white. And what we want is a paler than you think it needs to be middle, because we can always go darker, and also always bigger than you need to be. Now, the reason that we're going to be doing this smooshing and tapping technique with the mop brush is once we get on to some of the other colours, it is a fantastic way to build up texture. And for me, mop brushes just look like when you print on a mop brush, it just looks like leaves and foliage and plants and bushes. So as you can see, I keep adding little bits of white. Just want to make sure that center bit is really pale, way paler than we think. And I am working out the way, and I am going to go a little bit bigger, just bringing in some straight yellow now. I am going to go a little bit bigger than you think you need, because when you start adding up the other colours and the other layers, and we start getting all the depth and definition to this, it's really easy to get that middle bit to end up being really small. So if you just start bigger, then you're always going to be okay. So literally just tapping. Right, now we're going to go in with a bit more of an exciting colour, and you're going to see how we can build up these layers and the foliage. I'm going to give you many options to follow along with this, so you can do as little or as much in this session as you want. I have got two blues. I have got a cerulean and an ultramarine. So basically something that is like a standard, bog standard blue. anything that just feels a bit like, you know, the sky. And then a darker ultramarine, Prussian blue, anything like that, a bit darker. I've also got a cadmium yellow here as well, and you'll see how we're going to use these blues and greens, blues and yellows to mix lots of different colours of green. If you've just got lots of greens in front of you, get some yellow down and then just start using greens. That's okay. What we're aiming to do here, that's our background. That's our sunshine bursting through the trees and through the forest. And we are gonna bring all the layers of that forest to the front. So we're gonna go in now with a very pale, very yellow green, and then we're going to go in with a slightly darker green and getting a darker green and a darker green, and then, you know, we can add some dark green, actual dark green like a phthalo green or something in at the end, but we're going to build up all of those layers so that we work from the background to the foreground. So I'm just going to squeeze out a little bit of that blue. That's my cerulean, so that's my paler of the blues. But like I say, if you've got some green, go with a very yellowy green for this. So again, I'm just going to tap in. I've not cleaned my brush. I am still using the same brush. I'm going to tap into that yellow and the white because I want to pick up that colour. And I'm going to start by just lifting up the tiniest bit of blue. So let's see, look at that. That's like just the tiniest little dot of blue, and bringing that into the yellow and the white. And hopefully now you will see the magic of a mop brush. So if I start tapping this on, all of a sudden, and I'm going to turn my brush as well, so I'm rotating my brush like this as well as doing the tapping. All of a sudden, all these little bits of shapes and textures and prints from the mop brush start looking like foliage and leaves and branches and everything. And this is where, you know, look how quickly we kind of brought that circle in smaller. So then I'm going to just go in with a bit more blue, but still mixing it in with the yellow so that we get a green. But we're going to go for another layer where we've got a slightly darker shade in there. Sorry, I'm having to work at a really awkward angle because my camera is so close. It is right in the way. And we're just going to keep tapping and smooshing and building that up. Right, I'm just going to build some of that colour up further out now because there might be some of that colour peeking through other layers and the trees once we get there. So we're just tapping. Doesn't matter on these outer edges how it looks because it's just to fill in some space. Again, bits of just straight yellow on its own because they might be peeking through. Okay, I'm now going to take some of that yellow and I've just again picked up the yellow on my already mucky brush, and I'm just going to wipe some of that down here because this is not going to be foliage in the same way. This is going to be a bit of grassland and stuff. So picking up the yellow, picking up a tiny touch of the blue, and just starting to back and forth, side to side, some of that. Okay, so now that was our blue and our pale yellow. We're going to squeeze out some more of that pale yellow in a minute. But before we do that, we've still got some of our blue left, and I'm going to go in with the warm cadmium yellow. So I am working quite quickly through this phase because this is basically our background layers. We're going to add so much extra to it. So we've used our pale yellow and our paler blue. Now we're going to use our pale blue and our darker yellow, okay? So that's a cadmium yellow. It is a bit richer in colour. So we're going to mix some of that yellow in with that blue. Again, just tapping into the side. You'll see it's a very different colour of green we get. That's what I love about using 2 blues and 2 yellows. Let's see how we go. So remember, we want to leave some of that foliage that we've just printed on show. So we're going to tap some of that other greens in there. And again, just rotating my brush so that I get different marks and different prints, different shapes, and it's just all the branches of the trees, and maybe it's plants and other things going on. So you can see that's a very different colour of green, isn't it? It's fantastic. And then let's just scoop all of that off my palette and get some of that down in the bottom here, and basically wipe off any excess paint off our brushes here. So right, we have used pale yellow, pale blue and our darker warmer yellow. Now we're going to go in with our darker blue, which is the ultramarine, and the pale yellow. Okay, so we're back to the pale yellow, but it's the dark blue, okay? Again, if you're just working in greens or with whatever you've got, then please do just pick loads of different shades of green. What you want to do is start with the palest and end up with the darkest on top. And if you are just here to join in and see what it's all about, then welcome. I hope you're enjoying watching this. It's quite relaxing watching other people paint. But also, you know, just grab a pencil and a sketchbook and doodle. Have a doodle. Okay, so this is our dark blue and our pale yellow. And again, we are moving out the way, so we're getting closer to the foreground. And we're going to go in with that dark blue and pale yellow. Start trying to cover any white bits in your canvas, because we've got one more layer of colour to go. So I'm just going to make sure this edge here has got a bit of everything on it. So dark blue, pale yellow. This is my phone is so close. You can see here, look how close my hand is to the phone, but it is a little bit tricky thanks to Facebook Live and not Zoom. It's so much easier when I'm on Zoom. But just make sure all your white now around this top bit is covered, and just again tapping. Literally all we're doing is tapping. We're just using that mop brush to create fantastic shapes. I hardly got any blue in that one. Just using the mop brush, it does all the work for you. It's like having a stippling brush or something. And I'm just making sure that all my white bits are tapped away. And I'm just going to scoop up what I've got left, and we're going to start coming in a little bit down here. I'm purposely leaving a little bit of a gap because I think I want that bit to be a bit paler. And again, just taking all of our shades of green down into this foreground, down into what might be grasses or a field or a little clearing or something in the forest. And it's just a great way. This is why I've not actually cleaned my brush yet. I haven't managed to done this without cleaning my brush, because I'm just cleaning it down here. I'm going to leave that a bit paler. We're going to come back and add extra stuff to that. But we've got one more base colour of green to go. And then we are going to mix up some of those colours again. So don't worry if you've got loads of paint left. We're going to go back through and use some of those colours. In its very basic form, you can just do this entire painting with layering your mop brush prints. You don't have to add all the fine detail that I'm going to show you, but I like showing you what you can do, and to the extra that you can take it. So now we're going to go in with our dark blue and our dark yellow. So that's the ultramarine and the cadmium yellow. Oh, this gives you such a gorgeous earthy kind of olivey color of green. Turns out a bit like sap green or hooker's green, if we've got any painters that paint regularly and know those colors. The more blue you put in it, the darker it'll be, but just that really nice earthy tone with the warm cadmium yellow. And that's because cadmium yellow's got a little bit of red in it, so effectively you're mixing blue, yellow and red, which always gives you a brown, so that's why it gives you that much richer, more like olivey, I guess, color. So yeah, and I'm just tapping a few random shapes. Again, kind of every time you do a layer, you're kind of doing less because you're wanting to show the other layers from behind. If most of you don't know, I'm not sure how many people in this group do know, but I broke my wrist in February, and I now have a metal plate in it. The advantage of that was I taught myself to paint left-handed, so I can actually come over to this side of the canvas here and just use my left hand, because I had to keep painting, and so just taught myself to paint left-handed. So yeah, we'll just use the left over this side, make things easier. Sometimes forget that you can do that. You might notice that there are bits that are printing actual blue and bits that are printing yellow. Let me hold that up for you, so hopefully you can see that there are some blue and some yellow because they don't all mix. That's totally fine, because when we are painting shadows, if you paint them blue, they look more like shadows. So yeah, cool. I'm putting in a little bit of a bush here and a little bit of a bush here, and we'll work on that some more as well. And then again, let's just get a little bit of this random dark color down into this very foreground before we work on anything else. Right, I do want to show you the difference adding a little bit of an actual dark green in makes, but I'm also going to add a bit of dark blue to it because I want it to be really dark. Because in all my years of acrylic painting, the one thing that I think that I learned that really helps every single painting is to have an area that is way darker than you think it needs to be, and have an area that is way lighter than you think it needs to be, because ultimately that gives you that high contrast of dark and light. And for me, that's usually the thing that just makes a piece, it makes it pop. Otherwise, you know, it can look too flat if everything stays really samey. So that is a great top tip. Along with, buy yourself a whole ton of makeup brushes, because I use them all the time. Absolutely love them. So this is my ultramarine and some phthalo green, okay? And that's going to end up looking really pretty dark. But I love that. I have still not cleaned off this mop brush, and so now it is crazy and spiky and no longer fluffy, but that is going to give me some great shapes for this final layer, where I just want that last bit of texture and to really show that there are some dark shadows, and that's going to help make this bright area kind of really stand out as the light shining through the forest. So we're just going to do the same as what we've been doing. We're going to tap in to our paint. I'm tapping in on my little palette here before we start. Right, so we have got our dark colour on there now. Hopefully you can see it. And we're just going to go in. We almost want a tiny bit more blue in there. There we go. Acrylics do dry a bit darker, so do expect that as well. And then tapping in that last little bit, I'm going to use my left hand over here. And we're just going to go in with a little bit of that super dark. And just to balance the piece, I am going to just put a little few taps. I don't like that line being straight across there, so I'm going to fill in there. And I'm going to put a few taps on here too. We'll play about with all of this foreground in a little while, but that is our base background. I mean, doesn't it already look like a forest? It's just looking amazing already, right? I am going to give this a clean off, and I would suggest with a mop brush, give it a good rinse in your water, like really scrub it on the bottom of the jar, particularly when you've been using it like that and you've been doing loads and loads of colours. And the paint's been building up. And then don't just leave it in the water, or don't just leave it like that. Give it a proper clean and scrub on a bit of kitchen roll. I've got this horrible rag that you don't need to see any closer, but like properly give it a really good scrub. I would then clean this properly after I've finished painting, but see if it sits with any paint in it at all. You're going to lose that big fluffy texture that we love from a mop brush. So I've literally cleaned it out, and I will give it a proper rinse at the end of the painting session, but that's just going to save it just now. So what we really need is, we need for quite a lot of this to dry off, because I do want to show you guys how to do that sunburst. Can be a little bit tricky for beginners, but it is something that I wanted to include in this little taster session, because it is a fun thing to do. But before we do that sunburst, we're gonna add, or I am definitely gonna add, you guys could sit back and relax for a little bit if you wanted, because let's face it, you could go with something just like this and it would be fine. But I just want to add in a few more elements that make it look even more like a forest. Okay, so we're just going to go back to some of the colors that we had. In fact, I'm just going to put them all back out. I've still got some white there, so that is my pale yellow and my warm yellow, and then I'll put out my two blues, and I've got my white. If you've got paint still on your palette from earlier, from those colours that we mixed up, that's great, just use those. It's all good. But what we want to do is we want to use the same colours that we were using and work our way back again. So we're starting at the very background. So we have definitely got, just moving stuff out my way so I can paint at a funny angle due to my phone being in the way. So we're going to have some of our pale yellow, well, lots of our pale yellow actually, and we're going to start by adding the tiniest touch. Oh, I should show you again. Look how tiny, like literally just the very tips, not even the full tip of my round paintbrush, into a pretty big blob of the yellow. Look how green that went so quickly. Okay, so just always less is more. Add a tiny bit of paint as you go. You can always add more if it's not dark enough. So if you are a complete beginner and you want to add some depth at this point, then I suggest you just add in a few straight lines that go up and down, and maybe leave the center clear. If you are feeling confident and you've got a little bit more brush control, then just start adding in some little wiggly wavy lines that look like branches. Now, my top tip for making natural looking branches is don't hold your paintbrush away down here. That's great if you're trying to get like a perfectly straight line, but if you're trying to get a more flowing natural branch shape, if you hold it closer to the top, you don't need to hold it right at the top, but if you hold it closer to the top, then you end up with a much lighter touch. Like, you can't put a lot of pressure onto the canvas, so it makes it so much easier just to like wiggle in a few little branches. I am chatting to you guys, so I'm really gonna try not overthink this. I'd usually concentrate a bit more on where these branches and things are going in, but like I say, if you don't feel like you've got the brush control yet to do that, or you're still catching up with other bits, you don't even need to do this stage, or you can just add in a few straight lines just at the hint of some super far away trees and plants and foliage. You might even notice, like down here, hopefully you guys can see it on the screen, but like down here there's a print from the mop brush, so I might just emphasize that with a little bit of a curve so that it looks a bit like a fern or something like that. So you can kind of use the prints and marks that the mop brush has already made as a little guide. The other thing that you can do with a round brush is to dip into your paint and then twist it round and round and round and round lots of times, so that you coat the whole of your paintbrush, but obviously as well, because you're twisting it round, so you're twisting it round and round and round like that in the paint, and as you pull it out, it leaves your brush in a really nice point, so you get a really nice point. Now, if you do that with any round brush and you get that nice shape at the top, you then can hold it quite close, and what you can do is just press your brush down. Instead of down like this with the tip, you're going to press it more flat on the side. Hopefully you guys can see, and that the shape of the brush actually gives you a print that looks like a leaf. So let me bring it nice and close. So I am printing, pushing the brush down on its side, and it actually gives me a leaf print like that. Again, that just takes a little bit of practice. Doesn't matter how big or how small you make them. If anybody is following me, you will know that I am working in tiny, 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 minute scale right now. So obviously I have honed my printing things really small and working with really fine lines. Another top tip, don't forget that you can rotate your canvas. So I'm just rotating my canvas to make it easier to do a few more of those leaf prints. I am still using that colour that is my palest yellow and my palest blue, and we're just putting in a few little branches and a few little leaves just round the edge of that clearing. And then next we are gonna start working along and mix up those colours again and start adding them into every layer. Another big thing that I have learned through many years of painting is just to try not get too precious. So see, if you do something right now and you absolutely love it, don't be scared to paint on top of it, because sometimes you just have to. You have to paint the next layer over the top of the thing you just did, and it can feel really heartbreaking. I still feel heartbroken a lot of the time, but you'll get a better painting in the end if you just work in layers and you paint over the top and you put things behind, and it just, especially with forests and woodlands, it creates a more natural effect. I could obviously spend ages right now adding in details. I'm going to try and keep moving just so that we don't run over and we don't run out of time. But next we are going to go to our pale blue and our warm yellow. I don't mind a little bit of this green colour that we just made up coming in, because I think it helps transition all your colours better. So I'm just scraping up the end of that last green that we made, but this time I'm adding in some of the warm yellow, and again I'm going to start with the tiniest touch of that blue and then see how it looks, because I can always go darker, but it's really hard to go lighter again. So maybe just risk a tiny bit more blue. And this is where, at this stage of the painting, you know, it's entirely up to you. If you were following along at home, you could pause and you could spend as long as you wanted adding these branches and textures and everything that we're adding in. So again, we're going with our next shade of green, and we're just going to add in few things that we feel seem right. We've also got this very blue bit up here, so I might come in with a bit more blue and put in a few bits of maybe more bluer branches coming in here. You are just trying to be random, really. Don't overthink it too much. But we do want stuff to go on top of the stuff that was already there, because that's where we get lots of layers and lots of depth. There we go, got some of that nicer blue. Now I'm going back in with the green, because I also do like that green colour. No, I'm just trying to decide what looks good. Maybe down there. And it's okay to bring stuff over, you know, into your foliage as well. It doesn't have to all be in this space that we've created. Right, let's put a few more little bits of leaf and stuff in there. And like tend to follow the shape of where the mop brush has been sometimes, because it just gives another layer of texture. And then, you know, we're going to spend time doing all of this, and then if we get to add in the sunburst at the end, then we're going to paint over the top of most of this as well. So it really is all about layers with acrylics and not being scared to build those up. And then what's going to look good? Just tapping in, and you don't even need to, you can see now I'm quite quickly just tapping in little splodges and marks. They don't even have to be perfect leaf shapes or prints. I can just kind of see where I want some stuff to go. So we're just going to keep building that up, and I'm going to move through all of the darker layers. And like I say, if you want to rotate, because it's easier, so if I rotate the top, let's go in with some more of that bluey green this time, and then I can add maybe a few leaves to this branch. Might go in with just a few taps and marks. Don't be scared to rotate, it's all good. Okay, again, I don't want to run out of time, so I'm going to move on to the next colour, but you can spend as much time on these stages as you want. I hope you guys are enjoying painting along. We have done the pale blue with both the pale yellow and the darker yellow. So now we're going to do the dark blue, but with the pale yellow first. So I'm going to start with that blob of pale yellow. And we are going to go in with, oh, that's probably too much. We're going to go in with just the tiniest little blob of the dark blue. So we're just popping that on. Right, so we're going to now with a darker green. So it is the dark blue and the pale yellow. And we want to just put in a few little branches and a few little leaves and dots and dashes. We are beginning to work out though. So yeah, we want them to overlap, but we don't want to start bringing our dark colors right in on top of those paler colors, okay? So they can overlap in the sense that, you know, I'm going to put dark green maybe over this section. I'm maybe going to put some dark green over here, but I'm not going to suddenly bring dark green into the very center. We do want to keep that lighter. So yeah, let's just get a few wee dots and marks and all of that into this next layer. It is just layers, layers and layers and layers. If any of you follow me on YouTube, I post some tips and tricks over on my YouTube channel too, and in one of my most recent videos I'm just talking about layers, layers and layers, because with acrylic painting it is, for me, and this is just the way I paint, other acrylic painters do paint differently, but I just think you get, like, it just makes a piece so much more magical when we actually have all those layers and that you can see all that detail that is far away, as well as the close-up stuff. So yeah, right, let me try and concentrate for a second and put a few more little branches in here. Doesn't need to be tons at this point. We are getting really into that darker edge where the foliage is really thick, so we're not going to see lots of branches in that. And remember, you can have some coming down the way as well. There are trees up here that have got little branches, and if it's easier for you, turn your canvas upside down. It is absolutely okay to do that. I rotate my canvas a lot. And then again, just dotting in a few little dashes and marks that are just going to be defined foliage and leaves, because we've already got all this foliage. Got tons of foliage created by our lovely mop brush, so we just want to define the odd bit of it. Now, you know what, when I was saying at the beginning that we were taking some of those other colours further out, that's okay, because we want all these little patches peeking through, because it looks like maybe the tree canopy is a bit less dense there, so we've got little pops of light and things coming through. So we don't need to cover every single aspect of every layer. We can leave some of the other layers showing through underneath. And then the great thing about working with the mop brush is it kind of creates moments of natural light where, you know, bits are shining through over here, and I quite like that. I'm kind of purposely leaving as if there's two layers there and there's a bit of light peeking through some of that. But then you also might want to decide there's other areas that you just want to darken and just tap a few extra bits of paint on there. Okay, so we're going in with our last mix up, which is I'm just using that leftover green again that we've just made, because I do like bringing in the other colours that I've just created, because I do think it helps keep the whole piece together. So we've now got the darker yellow and the dark blue, but I've kind of gone 50-50 because I want this to be pretty dark. I really want to get a nice dark rich colour that's going to show, because remember we went very dark. In fact, all of that blue is going in, all of the blue that is left, not the pale one, just the dark one. I'm going to go for a really, really dark colour here, and we might even bring in a little bit more of that darker green, and then I'm going to show you another little trick as well. Right, so let's get some final big dark branches in here, and I'm going to think where I want them to be. Holding that too close because the phone's in my way, but it's fine. Right, so I kind of want to go like there's something happening right here. It's a little bit wiggly, and it's got sorry, I should have been saying, if you are a complete beginner and you're finding putting in all of these little wiggly branches and leaves too stressful, if you've just been putting in some lines and marks in every layer, that's going to work just as well. I've got a whole like total beginner version of this painting where all you do is up and down lines and it works just as well with that and the mop brush. Because we are getting a little bit closer, I am making some of these branches a little bit thicker. Okay, so they're gonna get thicker as they get bigger to us. And you know, I think I'm gonna kind of put in a small tree over here. And then where you've just got to be confident and paint over what you've just done. Not too thick because it's still not right at the foreground, and it's kind of going into those bushes. That's where I get stuff all over me. So yeah, I'm just going in with a little tree. Didn't have a tree in the original design for this painting, but it's a forest, so I'm feeling like I can absolutely do a tree. And I'm just losing those branches into that foliage above because I'm just giving the impression of there being a trunk here and then the branches going off. Doesn't need to be a perfect tree at the top because you can't see it because we've got all that dark foliage. This branch, however, though, I think we might be able to see the end of that, and we can definitely see if it's got other bits going off there. I feel like there's a gap in the picture there, so we'll go for another bit, and I'm going to risk a dark bit coming down here. Oh, where to stop? Sometimes less is more. Okay, yeah. And then again, up to you. The branches could be bare. They don't have to have leaves on them. They could have a very small little number of leaves just to represent that they're there. Kind of like doing that at the moment because we're in the turn of the seasons. So like it doesn't have to be full leaves on every single branch, or you could grab a smaller mop brush and you could add some leaves or the hint of leaves onto the end of those as well. I'm just going for a few little prints from my brush just to break up that. So hopefully you can start to see what I was talking about earlier, where you want to have an area that is much brighter than you think it wants to be, and then you want to have areas that are really dark and way darker than you expect them to be. So yeah, let's go for a few more little bits of detail. You know, I'm loving down here, I've got some mop prints that look very much like fern, so I am just going to try and exaggerate those into some fern branches, because I just think that's looking really nice. Sometimes you just got to go with what the mop brush print has left. And then I'm going to just tap in to break up some of that edge. And we will come down and work on a little bit more of this foreground down here as well. But I just breaking up some of the edges of the mop brush prints with just a few little taps and leaf prints in this super dark green, but also leave some of the mop brush marks, because those work just as nicely as well. So let's get a few little hanging over leaves on each of these bits of fern. Again, as much or as little detail as you want to add. If you don't have your canvas under a phone and you're not filming it for a tutorial, then hold your canvas up, hold it far away so that you can have a good look at it and decide, oh, where do I want to add something else? Is there a gap missing? Do I need to add something extra? Sometimes it's easier to do all of that from really far away. Now, here is my last little tip with these branches and marks and things, is we want something that's going to look almost black. So this was our blue and our warm yellow, our darker yellow. We can add a tiny bit of a dark green to it if you've got it. But even if you don't have a dark green, I know you should have a red with you, because I said to bring a red for that lovely mushroom. So add a tiny bit of the red. That red and that dark blue mixed in with that yellow are going to give us a really dark, almost black colour. And personally for me, I think it's a much nicer way to get a black colour when you're doing a piece like this than using straight black, because it's just a bit more natural. It mixes up to a kind of sort of dark brown, like a super dark brown though, that is almost black. And then I'm just going to go in with a few, not loads, but just a few last bits on this very outer edge where I've got some really dark prints from the mop brush. We're going to go in with a few little touches there, just in this really dark, almost black. Hadn't mixed all my green in, so hang on. Here we go. I'm going a little bit over the top tonight just because it's fun to sit and paint and chat to you guys. But yeah, don't worry about adding all these details if you're finding it tricky. Just wait and catch up on the next bit. Sit back and enjoy watching me paint until you're ready to do the next bit. You know, I'm just going to darken the side of that tree that is away from the light. So the side of the tree that is closest to the edge of the canvas. And let's keep painting. We are halfway. So I don't want to run out of time to do fun things like the sunburst and the mushrooms and all of that. I don't think I'm going to go too much more with that dark. You could bring in some just dark blue on its own as well. Often when we are painting shadows, we put down dark blue to create a shadow. But I want some of this area to dry before we go in with our sunburst. So we're going to concentrate a little bit more down here. I'm probably going to need that dark color again, but just going to clean off that round brush for now. I'm still just using the same round brush. It's just what I like to refer to as a kid's paintbrush, you know. Just a good old nice round brush, a little rigger. I want to fill in a little bit of lighter areas too. And I also want to talk about how you could add some highlights. So again, don't worry about making perfect leaf shapes or making perfect prints. Just dots and marks. Everything is going to look great. Dots and marks are all good for this piece. That is the lemon yellow again, so our lighter yellow. And I'm going to start with just some straight lemon yellow and add, I'm literally just tapping. I'm not even printing any leaf shapes here. I'm literally just tapping on a few little dots, and I'm just kind of going round the edge of where I did make some of those leaf shapes, because I'm adding almost like another layer of foliage in there. Hopefully you can see that. I'm loving this new daylight lamp I've got. It's working really well. So yeah, just tapping in. So again, you don't need to be printing leaf shapes. You can just be tapping and dabbing and making marks. It's all about playing and experimenting, and do not worry if it doesn't look anything like mine. That's all good, as long as you're having a chilled time and relaxing and enjoying yourself. Don't stress about it. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be fun. Fun is the name of the game. So just tapping in a few more wee areas of that straight lemon yellow on its own, because I feel like it gives a pop of, it's like an actual glow. Look how much that's glowing now, because I've got that lemon yellow on its own. And I'm even going to put that lemon yellow into a few of these lighter spaces. Again, I'm just tapping. I'm not making any particular shape. I'm just tapping. And the reason I'm adding in those little bits of lemon yellow in those paler bits is because it does suddenly look like maybe that's the sun shining through and glowing. You know when leaves get backlit, and you wouldn't believe it if you unless you saw it, but they get a sort of backlit and they kind of glow almost luminous. So yeah, just tap tap tap, tap tap tapping, and filling in some of those little paler areas and making them look like the light is shining through, even on top of some of the more medium, like on top of some of the blue. It's just giving it that little bit extra. What we're going to do is we're going to also take some of that lemon yellow and we're going to just start wiggling our paintbrush from side to side, just to fill in as if there's a bit more light into that area of the clearing there. Now, I'm not worrying too much about that because a lot of this is going to get covered up by our big sunburst. And then as I come down closer to that middle area here, I'm just mixing in some of those colours that are already on my palette. Doesn't need to be an exact colour, but it's still quite pale. And again, just tapping in, scumbling on the paint, even using my finger. Scumbling, love that word. It's actually a technical painting term. Right, let's get some of the pale blue and the warm yellow together with a bit more of the pale yellow. And again, just getting a little bit more lighter in there. Perfect. Just wanted to fill in some of that. Gonna go back over maybe this area with a bit darker in a minute. Do you know, we also could do with lemon yellow and the blue, and I'm just gonna fill in a little bit down here. I've just got little bits of my canvas that are still not fully covered. Again, you can add as little or as much detail to these as you want. Do not worry. About having a perfect foreground. Right. What I want to do is think about maybe where some of this light is causing highlights elsewhere. So we're mixing in that pale yellow with just some of our greens that are on our palette still. So we're getting a really, really light yellowy green. And I just want to tap in a few little splodges of that in places. Again, doesn't need to be perfect. But what you want to do is aim for the tops. So I'm doing the top of these little leaves here. I'm doing the top of this group of leaves here, and then maybe stepping back and doing the top of those, stepping back and doing the top of those. I'm just tapping on. Doesn't need to be perfect little prints. And that's just sort of starting to show that that light is hitting the top of foliage. So even down in this really dark foliage down here, the light is still managing to hit bits of that and creating lighter areas. Again, you could spend 4 hours painting this if you wanted, and you could add all of these details, or you could paint it much faster and just paint lots of straight lines and use your mop brush to make your textures. You don't need to go in with so much detail. There we go. I'm going to bring a tiny bit of white into that yellow and the green that's still on my brush. You might notice I don't tend to rinse my brush out a lot unless I'm going from very dark back to pale, because I do just think you get more cohesion through the whole piece because all your colours then blend. And I'm just going to tap in down here a little bit more lightness, as if some of that light is reaching out. Just want a bit of a lighter spot near the top here, because honestly we're gonna put a big bright sunburst on this. Okay, rinsing out my brush and just giving it a wipe off on my cloth. Let's go with our mushrooms so that all of this can get really dry, and then we'll just throw in a few little bit of grasses at the front just to really finish off this foreground. I want to make that very dark, just so that our sunburst effect works even better. But up to you how you want to do your mushrooms. If you want to do them really big, you could get away with doing really big mushrooms that look like they're really close to us. And then you could do smaller ones that look like they're sitting into this clearing. You can do them really simple. I'm going to start with the simple mushroom. I am just going to paint them on white so that you guys can see really clearly. But what we'll be doing is we'll be mixing some white, some of our yellows, and a bit of our red to make a really pale kind of brown mushroomy colour. So a little bit, that's both yellows, my pale yellow and my warm yellow. And we're going to need some red for the cap anyway, so we're going to get some red back on there. But basically, if you mix your warm yellows, white, and the tiniest touch of red, maybe the tiniest little bit of a green in there, you want to create a brown mushroomy colour. But I'm going to show you in white first so that it really stands out. Now, if you want to do a really easy mushroom, then don't worry about trying to paint the gills, okay? So when you try and paint a mushroom that shows the underside and the gills, that's a harder thing to do. So I'm going to show you both. You can just paint one mushroom, or you can paint two mushrooms, or you can paint three mushrooms. You can do anything you want. But the easiest way to do it is just like a triangle that's got a rounded top and rounded edges. So that's our cap of our mushroom. And I'm just always rolling my brush into my paint so that I get a nice point like we were doing when we were printing our leaves. And then you just want to do your stem, but it's going to have a big round shape on the bottom. Okay, so that is the basic shape of a mushroom. You can do them with a wonky cap, you can do them with small caps, tall, thin caps, anything you want. That's your basic shape. If you want to try and paint a mushroom with its gills showing, then I actually start with the stalk first. So we're going to paint this shape. And again, these mushrooms don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be amazing. Just have fun and enjoy it. Do what you think you can do. So, a wonky shape. I've got it leaning slightly to the other side. And then we do a curve over the top. And then you make that into like an eye. So if that joined like that, that would be an eye, right? Doesn't matter because we're going to paint over that anyway. And then that's where we would add our cap on top of that. And again, they don't need to be straight. They can just be whatever shape you want. I kind of think it's going to be fun to have another little wonky guy over here in this one, so I'm just going to do a much taller thin shape over here, and I'm going to make that one go like that. We'll see how that looks. Maybe I will add more. I'm just going to fill those in white purely because I've got the white as the base there already. My colours are going to look weird if I don't put a bit of white down for everybody. You do not need to do this white stage. You can go straight in with a mushroom colour. So, mushroom colour, I've got some white. I've got some warm yellow. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in the tiniest, and I mean tiniest little touch of red, because it's going to go orange really quickly. And then I'm just going to scoop up the tiniest bit of green that was lying on my palette, and that green's just going to help. Keep going with the green. It's just going to help bring it back down to a less orangey colour and a more kind of mushroomy tone. So there we go. Doesn't matter. There's a slightly greener one. You might have a slightly redder one. As long as we've got some colour that is vaguely mushroom shape, and just get your stalks filled in. Don't be too precious about these, because we are going to paint some grasses over the bottom of them, so I am not worried how these look at all. Right, so we've got our kind of mushroomy colour. I am going to make a more yellow version of that now, so I've just scooped up all the yellow that was left on here, and I'm going to mix in some of that, and I'm just going to use that slightly yellower version to go in my gills here. Again, as much or as little detail as you want. You don't even have to add mushrooms. If you don't want to add mushrooms and you just want to wait and add the grasses at the front, you can absolutely do that. Right, now we need a slightly darker version of this colour, because we want to add some shadows to it. So I'm just letting some of that dark, almost black colour that we had mixed in, just into that mushroom colour that we had, and then I'm definitely bringing some red into this. And we want it a kind of weird, I'm gonna say mushroom, because that is actually the colour you're mixing up. You'll get a kind of reddish grey is the only way I can describe it, but that is obviously, you know, mushroom colour. And then just add a few lines and a few dots and a few marks, because your mushroom stalks are not perfect. They're not all a solid colour. So round the base is going to be a bit darker because that's into the ground, and just a few scrappy marks. Keep it quite loose. I think this area of my forest is darker, so I'm making him purposely a bit darker. And then I'm going to roll my brush and use a really fine tip just to paint round that cap. Now this is just all practice. You're not trying to create a perfect finished painting. You are just experimenting and playing And if you create this piece and you hate your mushrooms, then great, you know, let's try it again next time. Let's practice mushrooms in the weeks in between, or let's do another mushroom themed painting to get better at them. You don't need to be perfect at everything straight away. Or if you've been painting for a while and you have your own way of doing mushrooms, then go for it. Yeah, do that too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a few little lines going round in a circle and making this really rough because I don't want you guys stressing about it. Doesn't need to be perfect. You just need a few little lines to represent the gills, and that's why I'm saying, you know, the easiest way to do your mushrooms is without the gills. I am going to clean off that brush again, and I always wipe it on my cloth. You can have a paper towel or a rag or an old kitchen towel or something, and we're just going to go in straight red on its own, and we're just going to add a nice layer of red to these mushrooms. Now, depending on your paints, you might find that you need to let that layer of red dry, and then you need to pick up a second layer of red, because some red paints are very, very translucent. But what I always like about paintings like this is with the dark green showing through, it kind of creates bits of natural shadows anyway, so it doesn't need to be loads and loads of layers of red. You can have that green showing through, and it just makes the top of the mushroom look a bit more like bits of it are lighter red and bits of it are darker red. So again, don't stress too much. It's just about having fun and relaxing. And we do want that red to dry in time to put a few white spots on there. So I'm just going to go for a single layer of red on mine. Just to build up that colour. One more. Obviously you guys could just paint one. You don't need to paint 20 million. I just wanted to show you some different techniques for the mushrooms. So you had a couple of choices, especially if you want to go back and do this on replay or try it again later. You've got a couple of options. I'm going to add the tiniest bit of red going behind my mushroom cap here, but you don't have to. There we go. Right, the other thing we're going to want to add, or I'm going to want to add, because I just always think it looks really cute, is I'm going to add some of those little white frills that mushrooms sometimes have. So I'm just going in with some straight white, and I'm going to just do some flicks from the top of the stalks coming down the way. They don't need to be perfect, they don't need to be solid lines, they don't need to be pointy, they're just that little frill that some mushrooms have. And don't worry if you're picking up bits of the paint underneath, that's great, because it's all just part of the colours of the mushroom. Just adding a few little touches of white in to those stalks as well. Okay, we need those caps to be fully dry before we add any white dots to them. So I'm going to work on just some grasses here. Now again, like the branches and things, don't worry about them being perfect. Don't worry about making really thin lines. Just get a few lines in to represent some grasses in the foreground. The other thing we want to do is make sure some of our grasses go across the bottom of our stalks. So I'm holding my brush near the top so that I've got a really light touch and that I can kind of really flick the brush onto the canvas. I want to hardly touch the canvas. I'm like putting the lightest pressure onto the canvas. I'm hardly touching it at all when I do this. And I'm just going to do it without thinking. I'm just going to go back and forth, and sometimes I hit the canvas and sometimes I miss the canvas. That's how lightly I am touching the canvas. So I'm literally just going, look, I've gone back and forth 3 times there and I've not hit the canvas once yet, because I'm trying to do it so lightly that you almost want to miss it and then just occasionally hit the canvas so that you get a few of these bigger lines. Now remember, these are grasses in the foreground, so they can be a bit thicker and a bit bolder. They're not tiny little grasses. And I am just going in with that dark color that we mixed up. They're really black, they're almost black. And again, I'm not worrying about it being totally perfect. I'm going in with some tall ones up here. Sorry, I keep bashing my phone. Going in with some tall ones at the side first, and then I'll go in with a bit more control, and we'll go in for some slightly shorter ones down the middle. So maybe about halfway, holding my paintbrush about halfway, and again just flicking, starting from the top of the grass and flicking down the way. Some people find it easier to go up the way, whichever suits. And don't be scared to take those grasses over the top of those mushrooms, because we want them to sit naturally in the ground. They're not going to be perfectly on show, are they? So just, again, I cannot stress enough that you basically want to be almost not touching the canvas, so as light as you can do it. And if you do end up occasionally touching the canvas a bit heavier, you just get a thicker grass blade, and that is okay, because grasses are all different shapes. And when your brush is running out of paint, just keep working it, because all that does is give you slightly hazy grasses, which is also fine as well. We don't need them all to be a perfect line. So again, being brave, working over the top of those mushrooms that we just created, because we really do want them to sit into the scenery. We don't want them just sticking out on their own. So we're going in with lots and lots of this dark. And because we put down, sorry, honestly, my phone is so close to the canvas here, just so that you can see all the detail, that my paintbrushes are too big. And just make sure your grasses go, like, some go diagonally, some go the other way. You know, you could have a grass going one way and a grass going the other way, all in the same bit. Keep rolling your brush so that you get that nice fine point. And if you want to, you can go in with those little leaf prints again, but make them as if they're the top of a grass. So let me find a good grass stalk for you and show you what I mean. In fact, let me just draw one in. I'm going to draw one in there just so you can see it nice and strong. And then I'm going to roll my brush to get it really nicely coated. And I'm going to do those little leaf prints again, but just to create, like, you know, the tops of the grass. So you can do that as well if you want, but if you don't want, you don't have to. You could also just get your mop brush back out and you could just print bushes along here just in the same way that we did up there. You could just print in with your mop brush just to give that some detail without you having to put too much work into it as well. In fact, I will show you some of that if you like. Let's have a few more. Since I've started adding a few marks, I don't want all just grasses, I want some of them to be leaves and look like leaves as well. Okay, just before I show you with the mop brush, the other thing that I'm going to do is just pick up any of those yellows that are left on here and roll, 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 roll. And I'm going to put the occasional really have to stop hitting the camera. I'm just going to try and put in the odd little flick of really yellow grass. I know it's weird, but because having that higher contrast of both the very, very dark and the very, very light is just enough to build up the foreground, and it makes it look a bit more like it's really close to us because we've got both our dark and our light in those. But I did say if you are finding doing grasses hard and you really want to just go in with your mop brush, then let me show you how that might look as well, because I like everybody to see how that goes. And into that dark again, just with our mop brush that we cleaned off earlier. So I've got some dark, and then we're just going to tap in. Look at that, it suddenly looks like bushes. So if you're struggling with the grasses, you can just do the same tapping in that we did at the beginning and make this bit down at the bottom some grasses. But what I also want to do is pick up some of that yellows again. So I've got just a light amount of yellow on there, and I'm going to tap in little bits of that yellow too, and that's really going to create that nice contrast of we've got dark shadowy foliage and it's got bits of light coming underneath it. I just want a bit more of the other colours coming in, just a little bit to break up that yellow. So I've just gone on with a bit of blue because there was still some blue on my canvas, and I'm just popping in a little bit of that, and so maybe that blue suddenly looks like it's the tops of some flowers. Maybe this has got some blue flowers down the bottom. So please do clean off your mop brush if you're using it. Give it a really good clean off, and then I'm going to scrub it out in my lovely old kitchen rag, but I just can't get rid of it because I absolutely need it every time I paint. I probably should put it through the wash, but I'm not sure that's going to help. So you can see that if you don't want to do all the grasses, or you're feeling the grasses are really difficult, just go back in with that mop brush and make it bushes and foliage. You could literally create this whole piece with just using the mop brush. You don't even need to put in straight lines or do any of the branches or the little marks, as long as you build up in the colours and in the way that we were talking about. So I think probably my red is just about dry to manage some little white dots on top. Here is a beginner friendly tip. If you want to make very small dots, then use the back of your paintbrush. So I'm just tapping that into my white paint, and I'm just going to use that to tap on. You do have to load it quite frequently, so you won't be able to tap all your dots on from the one pickup. And then the heavier you press onto the canvas, the bigger dot you'll get, and then the lighter you press, the smaller a dot you'll get. So you can vary the size of your dots by the weight. And don't worry if you don't get a perfect full circle, because sometimes mushrooms don't have perfect full circles. So let's go in. I'm just going in with my last little mushroom here. I'll just pick some random points. Sorry, I did just dump the camera again with my brush. There we go. Beautiful. Let's clean the back of my brush off as well. So, last thing we can add before we do our big sunburst is if you did want to add any little flower details into your foliage at the front here. Obviously I went in with some yellow, straight yellow and some blue just on my mop brush, and I always think that's like really good. But I've got some white left here and I've got this red, so I'm going to go white and red together. And again, I'm not going to fully mix this, so I get some white bits and some pink bits and some red bits. But I'm just going to go in with the back of my brush, and I am just going to do like 1, 2, 3 little dots together. Maybe occasionally I'll do 5 dots together. Odd numbers are always better. So there's 3. Let's do down here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yeah, just you can also go for little, just, you know, individual bits as if they're on the top of things. And I always think the great thing about printing with your brush is the back of your brush is it never makes a perfect circle or a perfect mark anyway, so it ends up looking a bit more naturally like a flower anyway. So yeah, just go for it. Dot away. You could go for as many colors as you want to mix up. The fact that you have got a yellow, a blue and a red means you can make most colors, but I would always add a bit of white in if we're just making it into like a little delicate flower thing down here. Go in with a bit of white, it's always good. Or you could just go in with straight white. You could have some white flowers as well. That might be really nice. In fact, I might do that, even though I was like, oh, use up the end of my white. I'm going to need some white for the sunburst anyway. So just tap on small ones, individual ones. Try not overthink where they go. Right, let me clean off that. And I am going to go in with some straight white. Let's add in a little bit of white. Sometimes I think, again, to balance a piece, just a few. Doesn't need to be lots. Just a little bit of white flowers. Using the back of a paintbrush. And as it runs out of paint, you'll also get different shapes and prints and patterns with it. Again, another time that if you can, hold your painting far away from you and see where maybe things are missing. But yeah, I'm going to call that enough flowers on mine. I hope you guys are all managing to catch up and keep up. I feel like I have been whizzing through this piece today, and I have shown you so many things. And to make this piece even more magical, we are going to add the one last touch, which some of you might not want to do, and that is okay. I would suggest you watch me do it and then decide if you want to add it or not, because you might just be perfectly happy with the way your piece has turned out. And this is something that, if you are a complete beginner, it is a bit tricky to get right sometimes. And if you are totally happy with your piece, it can be really difficult to just bite the bullet and do it. But I'm gonna do it. I am gonna need a clean palette for this because I have used up so much of my palette, but I am gonna just take that little dollop of white that I just put out and pop that on my nice new palette there. And I'm just cleaning off my brush, making sure it's very clean. I have got a little bottle of very clean water with me. You are going to need some very clean water to do this. So you might even want to wait and try this once the session is finished, and you can go and grab some clean water. You also want to make sure that everything that you have painted is fully dry, because we are going to do a wet glaze over the top of our canvas, and anything that is wet is just going to smudge. As long as it is dry, your acrylic is not going to smudge. So again, if you want to wait and do this later, give your painting a hair dry and just make sure it's really dry, or come back and do this stage tomorrow when you know it's fully dry. I'm going to risk it. I think the only bits that might still be a bit wet is some of my pink flowers, but I think the most of it is quite dry. So I'm just going to get some of my very clear, clean water, and I am going to mix in a little bit of white. Now, oh, I've got a mucky brush. Never mind. Make sure you've got a really clean brush. I'm not going to worry because I'm just going to show this to you guys anyway. And it was only a tiny bit mucky. And you just want to get to a consistency where you have got very runny white paint. I'm going to try and show you what I kind of know. So I'm just mixing a tiny bit of white in as I go. I'm going to see if I can get you guys to understand the right consistency. So it's basically water, but it is got enough paint in it to tint it, and we call that a glaze. The other way to do this is to add a glazing medium to your white paint, but I've just always done it with water because it's the same thing. And basically, where the water dries, it's going to be clear, and where the paint is going to stay white. So I'm just gonna bite the bullet and do a streak to show you the sort of consistency that I mean. I am going to start from the center of this circle, and I'm just going to streak out. So can you see that it's like white, but it's also see-through? So you hardly get any of the white paint, and anything that is just pure water in there will dry clear. But if you were to try and do the whole thing with your thin brush, it would take ages. So I suggest you use your mop brush, but I am not going to use my dirty mop brush because I guarantee that's not very clean. Let's have a look. Oh, it might be okay. Ooh, it might be okay. Okay, I'm going to risk it just to prove that I did the whole thing with two brushes. So I'm just tapping into that watery white. I'm starting in the center of my canvas, and I'm just going to flick really quickly and really lightly, hardly putting any pressure on it. I'm just going to flick out the way. And you do just want to really, really lightly touch the canvas, and we're just going to make this sunburst effect. Now you're mostly going to see it where the darker bits of your canvas are. Oh, this palette's right in my way. So again, I've not dipped my brush back into the paint. I'm still just using that tiny bit of watery white that I picked up. And I'm going to take some of it further out. I think I'm going to bring a bit more down here on the top of that mushroom. Again, still working from the same amount of white paint, so less is more. Really build it up in thin layers, and if you've got the time when you're doing this technique, let it dry, and then you can. Now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to pick up the last of that white paint that was on my palette there. So now I've got a little blob of white, and I'm just going to tap a little bit of white over the top of that center bit. And I'm going to risk one last swipe down, and I'm going to add a little bit more just to here. There we go. So that is the whole misty glow. It's going to look so much better when it dries, because there is so much of this that is wet water, and when it dries back, it's going to make it look even streakier. So give those brushes a little bit of a clean off. Now, if you wanted to, I'm always for about telling you what else you can add. If you wanted to, you could then think like, oh, where is that sunburst hitting? Oh, right, that sunburst is hitting the edge here. So you could tap in some paler yellow here. You could make the top of this mushroom lighter. You could make the top of this mushroom lighter. You could make the pink on the top of these flowers a more white pink because the light's hitting it, and every place where the light kind of hits, you could add a little highlight, you know, a bit of yellow in your leaves or whatever. But I quite like the dark effect and then the sun coming out. Yeah, thanks guys. I have loved tonight. It has been amazing. I am delighted with my enchanted forest that I have created. I hope you guys are delighted with your painting too, and even if you weren't painting along, I hope you just enjoyed the fun, relaxed, chilled, creative vibe of it all. Thank you all so much. It's been amazing. I have absolutely loved it. Bye for